So, a little bit to contemplate this week after what happened Wednesday.
Yeah, a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga, a lot of, man, I'm kind of dreading recording on Friday. And then we didn't record on Friday, and I feel much better because it's Saturday morning. So I guess we just do an in-depth review of the life of a showgirl. Is that is that what we're doing this morning?
Yeah, I've had myself a listen, and it's no midnights, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing is midnights
Mm-hmm.
in my
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kind of breezy pop. I mean, obviously drawing from Red, the same producers and all that. Little tinges of that here and there. It's a little countrified in points. Kind of explicit in parts. So we get to learn about her and Travis Kelce's love life a little bit.
Wow. I mean, before marriage, this is a real emergency.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. Clearly, no Austin FC emergencies happening, just Taylor Swift emergencies. We are kidding, of course. We are not going to talk a lot about what happened on Wednesday with the Open Cup. You were all there, you all saw it, but want to kind of take more of a look at what we learned from this going forward and applying to the probable playoff run, which could be a definitive playoff run if they do what they need to do, or if other teams need to do what they do for them tonight as they play St. Louis City SC in 2025's penultimate home match. Moisés, how are you feeling, and what is your favorite track on that new Taylor Swift album?
I don't. I haven't listened to it at all. Not a fan.
Oh, okay.
I acknowledge that Taylor Swift is important and a big deal to a lot of people, but she is not that important or a big deal to me. I'm more of an Olivia Rodrigo kind of guy.
That's fair.
I guess to kick things off, I know that something that I've seen is that a lot of people have been very reluctant to listen to their weekly podcasts because there is that kind of, oh, do I really want to relive my Wednesday night? Because as I kicked off the post-match press conference saying, en las buenas y las malas, I mean, it's a triggering, difficult thing. And it's something that we saw on the faces of players. We saw on the face of Nico. We saw on the face of Roto for 2 seconds as we saw him in the tunnel after the match. And I think the thing I wanted to lead with is something that I felt that night in advance of the match that is, I think, what carried me through watching those last 10 minutes, which is that I feel that there has never been a better opportunity for the players, the entire operation within the sporting side of the club to show up and show people who they are than in what I think is now officially the greatest moment of adversity in the club's history. Losing a final is something that lands with a tremendous amount of gravity. And even on the night, as I was trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to talk to these guys about this if what we're looking at ends up being a loss? I took a one-shot video of the supporters march prior to the match, weaving in and out of the crowd that I've shared in Slacks and chats and that sort of thing. And I'll probably post an iCloud share link on my Blue Sky after we finish recording this. That the entire fan base, new, old, everywhere in between, was able to summon the kind of very unique energy that those of us who were around for 2022 saw, and found a way, even in my opinion, to one up some of those highest of the highs from then is truly impressive. And undefeated in the stands is a common refrain, but I really never felt it more than I did on Wednesday.
Right.
And to me, the galvanizing effect of coming out the other side, of letting everything of Wednesday night land with them, of standing there and watching their opponents, who, to be clear, did not show up to play open play soccer.
No,
They showed up to win under any circumstances necessary, which is one way to win hardware.
Austin brought soccer to a knife fight.
Yeah. Very well put, Phil. And to me, it is a thing that one can be proud of winning in that way. But as someone who has coached youth sports in my past, who has taught next generations coming up in other ways, that to me is not something that I would ever want to be a part of as a fan, as a player. And regardless of, and like you said, we're not getting into analyzing every little beat by beat thing or finding fingers to point and that sort of a thing. But the kind of global 10,000 feet level sort of thing that I came to on the night is that officiating being what it was, not putting away chances being what it was, whatever, for the most storied, most historic cup competition in U.S. soccer history, the U.S. Soccer Federation needs to be taking a very serious look at itself in the mirror, because officials are officials. The play is the play. The teams that show up are the teams that show up. But at the end of the day, the U.S. Soccer Federation was the governing body overseeing and responsible for the way that that final ran. And in the same way that MLS should be looking at the way that Leagues Cup ended up with yet another MLS versus MLS final, I think that U.S. Soccer needs to really seriously contemplate how their cup final played out the way that it did, where they had their broadcast partner, which, let's be fair, they needed CBS more than CBS needed them, were directly questioning how did this play out the way that it did for a cup final, any cup final, much less the most storied trophy in U.S. soccer.
Right. I mean, you're referring to some of the officiating towards the end, the ability of the crowd to recognize that Nashville's goalkeeper was holding onto the ball a little too long, able to count to, what was it, 17 before he
22
let go of the ball.
22. I was out in the Eastern Concourse, and I heard plenty of people get all the way to 22, which, here's the thing, is that officiating crew did not mess up a World Cup final. And I think that there are definitely things to criticize. There are always things to criticize. Soccer is a game of mistakes. Soccer is a beautiful and imperfect game, and it's beautiful because it's imperfect in so many ways. The causality of all the different mistakes that happen in one 90-minute match truly boggle the mind, and it's really easy to go, well, this one thing, this one thing, this one other thing. I really appreciated Brad Stuver's very even-handed, you can criticize this thing or this other thing, but the culmination of all those things is what made the night. Yeah, to me, the opportunity going forward, and what I'm hoping people are actually listening, because I know that I was not eager to catch up on my weekly podcasts or people who had dropped since. I have never felt more optimistic about the resiliency and the ability to really show what there is deep, deep down, that in various ways a lot of these players have had to dig down for in other capacities. But there is, like Brad said when we talked to him in the tunnel, Nashville experienced losing a cup final in 2023.
Yep.
And that's something that Nashville players have had 2 years to inform and drive their comeback, their rebuild. And this is just the beginning point of that for these Austin players, for these Austin fans. And I think that the non-fair weather fan base and those who I don't consider fair weather fans but need a break this weekend, who are doing other things with their family this weekend, I think that's completely understandable, because the lead up and the build up to Wednesday, that was a lot for a lot of people. And the come down from that is significant. In no way do I begrudge people who need a break, who are maybe like waiting to listen to this until next week when they hear that it's safe. I feel like in ways that people couldn't expect how overwhelming Wednesday was going to be until Wednesday actually happened. I don't think a lot of people are anticipating the sort of revival of spirits that is possible tonight against St. Louis, that entirely relies on these guys showing up and being who, covering them all year, I am confident that they are. and that they will be. And I think that tonight is going to be an unexpected something special for beginning to heal some wounds, beginning to mend some torn fan muscle fibers. It was really something, to me, the two big emotional touch points of the post game were finding out after the fact that the last Austin player left out on the field was Ilie Sanchez. He went over to the supporters section and put his runner-up medal around a supporter's neck and challenged, encouraged everyone that he talked to keep their chins up, to keep the faith, to stay strong, and that he was going to, and that the players needed everybody more than ever, down to just making sure that he acknowledged every single kid that I saw him come anywhere near, and then reached out to touch his coach's arm as a gesture of solidarity before that press conference started, and his coach returned that gesture. There are those special things that happened. I wouldn't even use the word bittersweet, but that to me spoke volumes about the resiliency of this group that you do not often see when a sporting operation is facing this kind of defeat, this kind of adversity.
Yeah, it really struck me. That's the thing, just the mood in the press conference. I mean, you had asked that first question, and then the guy from the Open Cup site asked something that was tactical about crossing and stuff like that, and it just kind of fell flat. Like, Ilya at one point is like, well, I could give you a more detailed answer, but I would really have to think about it. I can give you kind of the reflexive answer right now, as he's clearly dealing with all this anguish, all this emotions and all that. So I was going to ask a little bit about the sub patterns and having Biru and Cascante in as maybe more offensive minded starters, but then shifted tact. And I wanted to ask about what they've learned from this whole run. Just thinking about, again, they were 20 minutes from elimination in their very first game to a USL side. They somehow dug deep and overcame and got the 3 goals necessary to propel themselves into that second round. And then they've just had this really incredible run up to now. And they definitely talked about resilience as this buzzword that came up, but when asked Brad about that, the mix zone after, because that's how Open Cup runs things, we didn't get to go in the locker room. I'm kind of actually glad that we didn't get to go in the locker room, because I'm sure that would have been rough. Normally we like that access, but I think like this was kind of fine and more appropriate. And Brad was just saying that we know what we actually, let me get the quote here because it's good. Sec here. He said, we're a resilient group, but we're also still a group that has to be at our best every single game. We're not a group that can rely on individual talent at each game. We're a team that has to rely on the collective, and we're at our best when we're sticking to the game plan. And again, yeah, you saw that contrast between obviously Nashville. Austin did a really good job of controlling Mukhtar and Suraj, but they each were able to step up and score a goal. Special players can do special things in special moments. Austin has players that can kind of do that in parts, but they're not an LAFC. They're not an Inter Miami. They're a team that really does have to play as a collective. And I think we saw that throughout this tournament in terms of who stepped up in those moments. And going into this match against St. Louis tonight, I feel like they're motivated, but then we'll talk a little bit later about just kind of playoffs and projections there, because we're going to assume they can get in. We'll run through in a second the scenarios that need to happen, but just thinking about going forward, again, assuming they get things done tonight or things get done for them, they have to think about those matchups. They have to think about where they're going to land. They're going to, as far as they go in the playoffs, will probably, given where they're going to finish, we'll probably have one home playoff game in that best of 3 series, and then everything else is going to be on the road. We know what they can do at home. We know what the crowd does. We know what the energy does. We know that they are less prone to giving up goals at home, but they'll have to do a lot of this on the road. It will be challenging. I think it will be another test of that resilience and just a good meter of where this team is right now. Can they win MLS Cup? Sure. Any team can win MLS Cup. Are they likely to win MLS Cup?
A whole other conversation.
Yeah, sure. Which we'll get to in a second, but anything you want to talk about otherwise with this Open Cup game? Wondering where the box of champion shirts are, because we know that Nashville had them because players and coaches were wearing those after the game. And I know that there was equivalent Austin box of shirts somewhere that probably didn't get opened.
Yeah, burn them. Might as well just pulp them, find a better use for them. Since we have ready bleeping technology, I just wanted to burn off a few things.
Swear word.
Anybody who said that these players didn't show up wanting to win.
Swear word.
Anybody who said these players did not show up trying.
Swear word.
Anybody who said this coach did not want to win and was not tactically trying to win a cup final.
Swear word.
Anybody who said that anybody on the Austin side was not doing their best or giving their best. And I'm including everybody, players, fans, staff of the club, people who want to revive long dispelled insane notions of there being a deserved curse hanging around the mighty oaks of Austin FC. To me, the cardinal sin is kicking your team when they're already in the dirt. And I feel like watching now rather thoroughly discredited, I believe completely uncredentialed, troublemaking
Swear word.
faces who don't deserve an accreditation badge anywhere they show up, to take this opportunity to
Swear word.
all over the people whose lives, careers, and futures were very much at play on Wednesday
Swear word.
night, all the way off into the horizon. And the rest of us will continue happily representing and supporting the standards of what believing in your city, believing in your club actually means. And as even-handed as we have to be as journalists, there is a notion of whether or not you are going for the controversy, going for the clicks, you're going for fulfilling your own predictions at the expense of the truth. And I would ask, especially in a really crazy time for things that are much bigger than football, there are much more important things going on than that game that happened on Wednesday night. A recent conversation between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ezra Klein, to me, delineated the difference to me in the importance of what journalists do in focusing on the truth above all versus putting your thumb on the scale as a form of influence while wearing the journalistic badge. And to me, as that relates to Wednesday night, I think there's plenty to totally reasonably critique on many, many levels. But to choose to be lazy, to choose to be self-involved, truly should reveal who people are in this moment that, as I said, I think Austin FC players, coaches, staff, everybody is going to show up tonight and show who they really are against St. Louis. Phil, you have previewed the St. Louis match.
Just one more note before we go on to St. Louis. So we finished up with everybody, like Brad left. We thought Diego might talk to us. Diego did not talk to us. That was fine. We figured, okay, that was it. And then Nico came back around to us in the tunnel and shook hands for those of us who had remained there. It was you, it was me, a couple of other folks. And after that, and just again, reinforcement, good guy that cares, just genuine, upstanding coach. Again, I think good game plan. I think lineup made sense. I mean, you have 18 to field. You don't have 20 to field. We're not going to dive too much into individual tactics and things like that. I just turned to you after that and I said, Josh would never. Kind of the difference between the first era where, it to me, just indicative of the kind of coach Nico is and the kind of culture that's being created. It makes me feel very good to cover this team. There's this interesting evolution that I think is happening with the club, with Nico and with Rodo and with their influence. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be maybe the caliber of roster yet until more Cam comes in, but I like what's being built here.
Yeah. Bringing back the old canard of pressure makes diamonds and diamonds aren't made in a day. I think that bears mentioning. And as much of an improvement as I think that Rodo is in sporting direction over Claudio Reyna, who made some bafflingly, shockingly terrible contract decisions we now know from publicly available data, there's also, as I keep saying, there are totally valid reasons for critique of coaching decisions, rostering decisions, there is always going to be that sort of what if. To me, actual accountability is a massive step up from the earliest learning to walk days of this still young club, where I was on the We Are Austin Twitter space following the match, and I reacted relatively violently to somebody asserting that Austin will never host a cup final at home ever again, because the club is 5 years old, folks. 5 years old.
Right.
We are just half a decade into existence as a professional sports city, and you can't let pessimism and cynicism get to you in this time when there are much bigger, much crazier things to feel hopeless about. That's what I would ask people try to hang on to. And again, let the players make me a liar, but I am very confident that tonight we will see the even deeper down version of these guys than we have seen before, who many of whom I think have spent the last few days worrying about and questioning themselves over mistakes that were made, things that they may be blamed for, ways in which the fans may hate them uniquely, that sort of thing. Probably some social media account deactivations out there or something. I haven't really been paying attention. But I think there is the potential for something very special on a night of not even low expectations, but of 1,000-yard stare, pondering the universe kinds of vibes where people are looking for direction. So what direction do you think we're going to be taken in tonight, Phil? You've previewed this St. Louis match.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about it. We are facing a team in St. Louis who is already eliminated. They did actually have a little bit of an uptick. They had 2 wins before that 3-0 loss to LAFC that eliminated them from playoff contention last weekend. So Justin Horniker over at Talkin' Soccer was recounting that loss, and David Critcher, who is their interim coach, because again, remember, Olaf Melberg started the season as their manager and was done less than halfway through the season. It was 15 games. That's kind of alarming. So this is Critchley talking about their offensive performance against LAFC. I'm not going to isolate any single player. If we can't get in behind the last line, maybe it's the defenders on the ball and can't play out of it. Maybe it's the midfield's fault. We can't connect enough passes. It's a collective on the ball tonight for us. We have to have players that are more brave playing in these types of events and situations and getting on the ball and playing out of it. We didn't have that tonight. And then Edward Lewin, who has been playing for about half the season. He struggled with some injuries, said, I think we didn't have a thought already when we received the ball. Then oftentimes we just played a long ball and expected our wingers to win the long balls against their tall, strong defenders. And obviously that didn't work out. I think that's on us. We had a clear game plan. We didn't execute it well. We were just very sloppy on the ball. And I feel like the guy on the ball often was the poorest guy on the pitch because we seemed, especially in the first half, we seemed intimidated. Boy, so that's the team that they're facing tonight. And again, Klaus is still Klaus. He's got 9 goals on the season. Hartl is having a decent season statistically. But yeah, this is a team that has not been able to put it together, that has not really had a clear identity that they had when they got into the league. Luch Flannensteel, who is their sporting director, who was the architect of that team, the one who had, we'll remind you, Emmanuel Veth's tweet where he said that they have basically cracked the code of MLS. That has been rescinded. Lutz is no longer there. Yeah, this is a franchise that's struggling. I mean, obviously, Austin still has some development. We're seeing, obviously, from that Open Cup that some individual players might have to really dig deep and be tested and learn some things from that, but they're not what St. Louis is right now. St. Louis is in a much more kind of desperate shape. If Austin is able to, as they talked about post-match, using that pain as fuel, being able to channel that into play, and with Gallagher talking about what's good about this is that they get a new game within 72 hours, which they typically prefer to having to stew over things during like a week international break, for instance. I feel like Austin's going to be up for this, and they're going to have the ability to not only shut down an offense that seemed maybe kind of stymied against LAFC, but also kind of an opportunity to score a lot of goals against a team that, again, like you had talked about last week, really had nothing to play for except just like individual status in terms of like keeping contracts, keeping jobs, and maybe, who knows, maybe even trying out some newer players and see what they've got for next year, because there's nothing really to play for this year.
I really have no change to that expectation week over week since we last recorded together. And I should mention that I did enjoy in the moment listening to the one that you dropped with Ben Wright, though I don't know that I recommend people listen to it now. I give it a few years. I posted an update to the Austin's Remaining Opponents article with annotations with additional bits that just skip past the Nashville part because we're past that point. And that's really where I landed on the St. Louis thing, is that there's really no change, because when I wrote the original version of it, it was like St. Louis ain't going to make it. They're just not going to make it. Mathematically, they had not been eliminated. And that was back at the beginning of August that I was saying they haven't been mathematically eliminated, but they ain't going to make it, y'all. And I think that their sporting operation, whatever reasons there were for the firing of Bradley Carnell, who is now riding high at the Philadelphia Union, who are very solid supporter shield contenders. I think there's
probably going to get it this weekend.
Probably going to get it this weekend. That's the thing is, I think that sort of meta thing hanging over it is the only real modification that I've got to what I said previously about them, which is that it is full, deep multiple layers of introspection mode for their whole group, where that's the opportunity for some people to show up big, show up crazy. And I fully expect them to be planning to directly taunt Austin players on the back of losing a cup final. But I likewise would predict Steely Gaze Terminator T-1000 level "today is not the day to mess with me" getting stared back at them from Austin players. I don't know that if St. Louis thinks that they are going to come to house this place, that it's actually going to go that well for them. I've never seen John Gallagher the vibrating level of angry that I saw him. I never saw before the tunnel the level of cold-eyed, I just dare anybody to mess with me out of Brad Stuver. And I've seen a lot of layers of that, but this is a time when I would never want to be a player on the Purina Dog Chow Boys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk briefly here about the playoff scenarios and what needs to happen here.
Let's do it.
The easiest way to do this is if Austin wins or draws against St. Louis tonight, which, as we've just covered, a likely prospect. You're kind of feeling good about that. Austin's in no matter what. And that gets them to 45 or 47 points with a draw or a win, respectively. And of course, we've talked about that 45-point tier being what usually it takes to get to the playoffs. So there's some really interesting other games going on that are going to do a lot to determine what's going to happen in the playoffs. You are going to see these kind of scenarios where teams might not quite be eliminated, but Colorado RSL is going to be a very interesting one. San Jose, Vancouver, Dallas, LA Galaxy, and those have implications for Austin getting in the playoffs as well. So even, let's say Austin FC still has an Open Cup hangover tonight and they lose, they can still get in the playoffs one of 5 ways. So just follow here. It's a little confusing, but okay. So if Colorado lose at Salt Lake and San Jose lose or draw at Vancouver, or if Salt Lake lose versus Colorado and then San Jose lose, draw at Vancouver, or Colorado lose at Salt Lake and Dallas lose versus LA Galaxy, or Salt Lake lose versus Colorado and Dallas lose versus LA Galaxy, or Dallas lose versus LA Galaxy and San Jose lose or draw at Vancouver, that is enough to ensure that Austin will make the playoffs no matter what. Of course, if they want to avoid the play-in game, that 8-9 match, probably will have to do a little bit more to do that. But, again, with that Colorado Salt Lake game in particular, right now Colorado is at 8th place on 40 points and Salt Lake is 11th on 37 points. And if Salt Lake wins that, they'll be tied on points, but they'll have the win tiebreaker, which is the first tiebreaker, with 2 games remaining for Salt Lake and with 1 game remaining for Colorado. So that game is hugely important. Of course, San Jose and Vancouver is interesting because Vancouver also played a cup final on Wednesday night. They won their 4th straight Canadian championship. And then, of course, Dallas and LA Galaxy. LA Galaxy is eliminated. They lost the Campeones Cup to Toluca in late heartbreaking fashion. Yes, there was also randomly a Campeones Cup match on Wednesday, as well as the Open Cup final and the Canadian Championship final. Maybe they should have spaced those out a little bit, because I don't know that any of us were really aware, except dimly, those of us who are like super tuned into MLS, that Campeones Cup was happening. But
allegedly
again, yes,
happening.
Yeah, so you've got the Galaxy coming off that disappointment as well. You've got Vancouver coming off that. So those are unusual games just because, yeah, like with Austin, there is just that 3-day turnaround, and teams obviously, again, how they manage, in the case of Vancouver victory, or how they manage in the case of the Galaxy and Austin defeat, will have some implications immediately on what's going to happen with the playoff race here. So tonight, pretty fascinating night. Obviously, I imagine most of you will be at the stadium, but if you are deciding to stay home, you don't want to deal with the crowds and all that, you can multi-view if you have those capacities and watch a lot of really interesting stuff transpire.
Since you mention it, let me bring up my beloved multi-view, my favorite thing about MLS Season Pass.
Yes,
If you
please do.
have one of the newer generation Apple TV boxes, if you have basically a version of the iPad that runs a remotely recent OS, you may not be aware that you've been able to put multiple MLS broadcasts on simultaneously and mix your own MLS 360 without the commentary if you want, where it's a little box divided into quadrants, whether you swipe up on the remote on the Apple TV box or if you just bring up the little controls on the iPad. It's something that I've used in the press box. I've used on MLS Next Pro Decision Day with a monitor connected on the press porch out at Palmer Field last year. It's something that if you're interested in watching multiple games, you can even have MLS 360 on as one of the up to 4-up options, where it can divide everything into even-sized quadrants, or you can have one big and 3 stacked on the side. It's really great, and it's, to me, so much better than the way that, say, NFL Red Zone, the ESPN app will do this, where it's, all right, you're going to pick these 3 games in advance. This lets you resize things, swap to one audio feed versus another, that kind of thing. It's really great. And yeah, it's unfortunate that it's not on non-Apple platforms, but then that would require Apple to support other companies' hardware, which is a world of disaster. As somebody who uses Apple stuff, but is by no means like an Apple absolutist, I would rather it work reliably than them, say, sure, it'll work on this Amazon Fire Stick, and that crashes every 3 seconds.
Yeah. Now that we have praised multi-view capacities of Apple, I actually looked at the times for these games, and no multi-view really necessary. Let me run down the times. That Dallas LA game is at 3:30 today. Austin, of course, that's kicking off 7:30, as you would expect. That RSL game, that is 8:30, so there's some overlap there. Vancouver San Jose game is until tomorrow at 5 p.m. So never mind. But we will know going into that Austin game, at least part of the equation, right? So if Dallas has lost, then only kind of one loss will need to happen. Of course, all of this is moot if Austin wins or draws. I'm not even going to get into this right now, but there is an outside chance. I mentioned this in the article on Friday. It does involve rooting for Nashville, but there is a very slight chance that if Nashville wins their next 2 games, which would get them theoretically into higher up in the Supporters Shield standings, Austin could maybe theoretically get into CONCACAF Champions Cup still, or of course, if they win MLS Cup, they can get in. But there's still a very slim chance, even if they don't win MLS Cup, that they can still play in that tournament. That probably will not happen. It's probably more likely going to be another Open Cup run next year, but just some food for thought out there in this. You're saying there's a chance department.
You say Open Cup. The difference is that Austin makes the playoffs this year based on the standards that they set up. That means Austin plays in Leagues Cup instead of Open Cup.
Okay.
And then Austin FC2 would be more likely selected to compete in Open Cup, as various non-Open Cup competing sides, second teams, did this year. But it's MLS. Who knows what they'll decide to do next year in a World Cup year? Things could get real crazy.
We do know that they are planning right now to run Leagues Cup, even though there is a World Cup and all these other tournaments. So we'll see about that as well. This seems like maybe this is a year that they would hit pause on Leagues Cup, but with all the wonderful momentum they built up, why would they do that?
Well, I mean, because at the moment, the aftermarket pricing on World Cup tickets is roughly equivalent to the down payment on a house. They're going, hey, for a fraction of that, would you like to watch some MLS and Liga MX teams play against each other in the group stage?
All right, let's see. Anything else that we need to hit? Next Sunday, as you might know, Austin is hosting LAFC. That is the last home match of the year, assuming playoffs, as we mentioned before. There would be one home playoff game in that best of 3 series. Again, we're probably looking at Austin being 5th through 7th. We're looking at any of San Diego, Vancouver, Minnesota, or potentially LAFC, potentially Seattle as opponents. And as just kind of a thought exercise looking forward a few weeks. Right now, do you think Austin gets out of the first round in any of those scenarios?
Absolutely. I think that to follow on from what I was saying in the wake of the Open Cup final is that like never before, I believe that this sort of adversity focuses minds more than we can expect until we see it. And I think that we're going to start seeing it tonight. And I fully care about the MLS playoffs relative to the Open Cup all you want. I feel like the result that we're going to see is there are a bunch of these guys that are on options. There are a bunch of these guys that have something to prove to me differently than, for example, what the St. Louis players do, which is dog paddle for dear life. I have nothing but confidence that these guys are going to show up and dispel some, I think, erroneous expectations that people have about what they can do. We saw that in the Open Cup. That is part of the story of this season, and I think that story continues into the playoffs. There is so much completely up in the air that there are too many variables to accurately predict based on who that first round opponent is. But even if it is an LAFC with a Son Heung-min and Denny Bouanga on an absolutely insane heater, the craziest things in the world happen during MLS playoffs that one would not believe. And I don't think there is any scenario that decisively counts Austin out, because that's what many, many people did from the beginning of that Open Cup run, let alone into that quarterfinal, into that semifinal match where we laminated it, man. We laminated all the people who said there was Austin stood no chance, and they showed up big, and they showed up in ways that people did not universally predict, that the betting lines did not predict. This is one of the continuing stories of Austin, is that this is a group that defy expectations, especially when people count them out.
Yeah, and especially thinking back to last year's MLS playoffs as well. Nobody really gave Atlanta a chance against Inter Miami.
Nope.
And then Brad Guzan came up big. So when you have a goalkeeper who can have an outsized performance, that is certainly something to factor into the proceedings. LAC and Vancouver really scare me in particular. Austin proved that they're going to be tough out. I don't think that a team is going to come in and get too straight against them. I kind of imagine that no matter what happens, even if it is an LAFC, even if it is Vancouver, I think Austin stands a good chance to at least win that home game. We'll see. We'll have time in a couple of weeks here to get those matchups all set and talk about those. But of course, job one here is to get into the playoffs itself. I clearly believe that that's going to happen tonight, even if Austin loses, which is not my expectation. And again, just a reminder, Brad Stuver is one save away from tying that 5-season MLS regular season saves record, and 2 from breaking it. Y'all know what to do on those first 2 saves, fans.
One other thing that I wanted to note is that locals who are into the broader soccer community, if you've ever had tacos at Paprika, they have officially soft opened their brick and mortar location on North Lamar, right next to where their truck is. And
nice.
I went and had lunch there yesterday, and I got to say, the vibes are immaculate. They got some new shirts. Smalls and mediums are the only sizes they got left, and some really cool corduroy snapback hats. So go support a local business that is intimately intertwined into local football culture. Get your vitamin T and get ready for the match tonight.
Okay. Well, I'm on the other side of some Trumbull stuff that kept me down yesterday, kept me from recording. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, all I could do was just hang out with my daughter, who was off school yesterday, and listen to that Taylor Swift album with her. So, which again, yeah, there's some subject material that yeah, I don't know.
It's sailed over her head, hopefully.
It is. Nah, I don't know. She just binge watched Bob's Burgers over the course of about a month, all 15 seasons. So.
Butts.
My daughter's getting an education. So.
Yeah. A TV-based education, the finest in the United States, Phil.
I mean, a real education too. So there was also a teacher conference this week, which was enlightening. Going into that, our daughter asked, "Are you going to ask about my behavior?" It's like, oh, I guess we're going to have to ask about your behavior.
I guess we're definitely going to ask about your behavior. Thanks for the tip.
And speaking of my daughter,
This is the best thing I've heard in the history of the 8 years I've been on this planet.